The amber glow of the dying fire cast long shadows across Felicity Calhoun's face, reflecting the last embers of hope that had sustained her on this grueling journey west. Colorado Territory, 1876, had shown her nothing but hardship since she'd left Boston 3 months ago, and now, as the fire dwindled to mere cinders, she wrapped her threadbare shawl tighter around her shoulders and stared into the darkness. Her wagon had broken an axle miles back. Her guide had abandoned her after a disagreement about payment, and with winter approaching, she feared she might not survive another night in this wilderness alone. "Want me to build it up again?" The deep voice startled her so badly she nearly toppled from the log where she sat. A tall figure emerged from the shadows, his silhouette unmistakably that of a cowboy broad-shouldered with a distinct Stetson hat. As he stepped into what little light remained, Felicity could make out a face weathered by sun and wind, yet surprisingly youthful. "Yes," she finally answered. "Yes, I would appreciate that." Zach moved with practiced efficiency, gathering fallen branches from nearby and arranging them over the embers. Within minutes, flames danced anew, pushing back the darkness and bringing welcome warmth. "You're a long way from anywhere," he observed, settling on a fallen log opposite her. "Not safe for a lady to be traveling alone." "I wasn't alone until yesterday." Felicity explained about her guide abandoning her and the broken wagon several miles back. "I managed to salvage what I could carry and was hoping to reach Willow Creek by tomorrow." Zach shook his head. Willow Creek's still 30 miles northeast. Rough country between here and there. He studied her face in the renewed firelight. "You got family waiting?" "No, just a teaching position." Felicity didn't mention that the position was her last hope after her father's death had left her penniless and alone in Boston, with nothing but debts and unwanted suitors seeking her hand for what they wrongly believed was a fortune. "Well, Mississippi." "Calhoun. Felicity Calhoun." "Miss Calhoun, you've got yourself a problem. But maybe I can help. I'm headed to my ranch about 10 miles from here tonight, and tomorrow I can take you to Willow Creek myself." Felicity tensed. "That's very kind, Mr. Owens, but I couldn't impose." "It's no imposition. I've got business in town anyway." His eyes, which she now saw were a striking blue, held her gaze steadily. "I understand your hesitation, madam, but these hills aren't forgiving, especially to those who don't know them." The fire crackled between them as Felicity weighed her limited options. Die alone in the wilderness or trust this stranger? Neither choice seemed ideal. "I have a sister," Zach added quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "She'd have my hide if I left a woman alone out here. You can keep that derringer in your pocket pointed at me the whole time if it makes you feel safer." Despite herself, Felicity smiled. "You noticed?" "Hard not to. You've been gripping it since I arrived." A small smile crossed his face. "Smart of you. But I promise I mean no harm." The sincerity in his voice swayed her. "Very well, Mr. Owens. I accept your assistance, and I thank you for it." "Good. We'll set out at first light." He stood, adding more wood to the fire. "You eaten today?" She hadn't, not since a meager breakfast of stale biscuits, but pride kept her from admitting it. "I've got some dried venison and beans," he continued, not waiting for her answer. From his saddlebag, he produced a small pot, some meat wrapped in cloth, and a pouch of beans. Within minutes, he had a simple stew cooking over the fire. As the aroma filled the air, Felicity's stomach growled embarrassingly loud. Zach pretended not to notice, instead telling her about his ranch and the small herd of cattle he was building. "It's not much yet," he explained, stirring the pot. "But in a few years, it could be something substantial." "You're out here alone?" she asked, accepting the tin cup of stew he offered. "Got a couple of hands helping with the cattle. Good men." He settled back down. "But the land's mine. Worked 6 years driving other men's herds to earn enough to buy it." As they ate, Felicity found herself relaxing slightly. There was something reassuring about Zachary Owens' steadiness she hadn't encountered often in men. "What about you?" he asked after a while. "What brings a Boston lady all the way out here to teach? Must be plenty of schools back east." Felicity considered how much to share. "Circumstances changed after my father passed. The position in Willow Creek offered a fresh start." Zach nodded, not pressing further. Fresh starts are what the West is all about. They talked as the fire burned strong, Felicity gradually revealing more about her journey and Zach sharing stories of the territory. When exhaustion finally overtook her, he insisted she take his bedroll while he kept watch. "I've slept on harder ground with less reason to be grateful," he said when she protested. Felicity couldn't remember the last time she'd felt safe enough to truly sleep. But that night, with the fire blazing and Zachary Owens keeping guard, she fell into a deep, dreamless rest. Morning brought crisp air and clear skies. Zach had coffee boiling by the time Felicity awakened, and breakfast consisted of more dried meat and hard biscuits from his provisions. "Hope you don't mind riding double," he said as they prepared to leave. "My horse can handle it, but it won't be as comfortable as your wagon was. After walking yesterday and sleeping on the ground, Mr. Owens, I'm not particular about comfort." He smiled at that, a genuine smile that transformed his rugged face. "Call me Zach. Anyone who shares my coffee and fire shouldn't stand on formality." The journey to Zach's ranch took most of the day. Riding behind him, arms cautiously around his waist, Felicity found herself studying the landscape with new eyes. What had yesterday seemed hostile and barren now revealed a stark beauty: rolling hills covered in sage, distant mountains with snow-capped peaks, and vast open spaces that spoke of possibility. Zach's ranch came into view as the sun began its descent, a modest cabin with a barn and corral, nestled in a protected valley with a creek running nearby. Two men were mending a fence line, but paused to wave as they approached. "Not much to look at," Zach said, a note of apology in his voice, "but it's home." "It's wonderful," Felicity replied honestly, struck by the peacefulness of the setting. That evening, Felicity experienced her first taste of ranch life. The cabin was simple but clean, with a main room that served as kitchen and living area and two small bedrooms. Zach insisted she take his room while he would sleep in the bunkhouse with the hands. "I couldn't possibly," she began to protest. "It's already decided," he cut her off gently. "My mother would haunt me if I didn't offer a lady proper accommodations." Over a surprisingly good dinner of beef stew, cornbread, and coffee, Felicity found herself sharing more of her story. She told them about her father's business failures, the crushing debt he'd left behind, and her decision to take the teaching position out west when more unsuitable options presented themselves in Boston. "There was a banker's son," she admitted, "who offered marriage. Made it clear it was my only sensible option. And you chose teaching wild frontier children instead?" Miguel asked, impressed. "I chose freedom," Felicity corrected, "even if it meant hardship." She caught Zach watching her with newfound respect, and something else she couldn't quite name. That night, lying in Zach's bed, surrounded by his few possessions, books on animal husbandry, a well-maintained rifle, a small photograph of a woman who must have been his mother, Felicity realized she felt more at peace than she had in months. Tomorrow would bring Willow Creek and her new life as a teacher, but for tonight, she was safe. The morning brought an unexpected complication. Dark clouds had gathered overnight, and rain began to fall as they prepared to leave for town. "This could turn nasty," Henry warned, studying the sky. "Might want to wait it out, boss." Zach looked torn, glancing between the threatening sky and Felicity. "Miss Calhoun's expected in Willow Creek. School doesn't start for another week," she offered. "If it's dangerous." "It could be," Zach admitted. "These storms sometimes flood the creek crossings. Might be best to wait a day." And so one day turned into three as the rain continued relentlessly, transforming the landscape into mud and swelling the creek to a dangerous torrent. Felicity found herself surprisingly content in the unexpected delay, falling into the rhythm of ranch life. She insisted on helping with cooking and mending, tasks that earned her appreciative nods from the men. On the evening of the third day, the rain finally stopped. Felicity and Zach sat on the cabin's small porch, watching the sunset break through the clouds. "We'll leave for town first thing tomorrow," Zach said, though she detected a note of reluctance in his voice. "Thank you for your hospitality," Felicity replied. "I don't know what would have become of me if you hadn't found me by that dying fire." "Fate, maybe," Zach said softly, then seemed embarrassed by his own words. "I mean, lucky coincidence." "Perhaps it was fate," she agreed, surprising herself. Their eyes met briefly before Zach looked away, clearing his throat. "I was thinking, Willow Creek School doesn't have proper accommodations for the teacher. You'll be boarding with the preacher's family." "Yes, that's the arrangement. The thing is, It's a mighty small town. Not much by way of society or comforts. He hesitated. If it doesn't suit you, you'd be welcome to come back here. I've been thinking of hiring a teacher for the ranch. Miguel can't read, and there's other hands with children nearby who could use schooling. Felicity was touched by the offer. That's very kind, but I've signed a contract with Willow Creek. Of course. Zach nodded, standing abruptly. Just wanted you to know you have options. The journey to Willow Creek the next day was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. The town, when they arrived, proved even smaller than Felicity had imagined, a single dusty street with a general store, saloon, small church, and scattered houses. The schoolhouse sat on the outskirts, a plain wooden structure with peeling paint. Reverend Miller and his wife greeted them warmly, though their small house already seemed crowded with their 4 children. Mrs. Miller showed Felicity to a tiny room that would be hers, barely large enough for a narrow bed and small chest. It's not much, the woman apologized, but it's clean. It's perfect, Felicity assured her, though her heart sank at the thought of the long winter ahead in such cramped quarters. When it came time for Zach to leave, an unexpected awkwardness fell between them. He stood by his horse, hat in hand, searching for words. If you need anything, he began. I'll be fine, Felicity assured him with more confidence than she felt. Thank you again, for everything. I'll be in town every couple of weeks for supplies, he said. Would it be all right if I checked in on you? The question held more meaning than its simple words suggested. Felicity felt a warmth spread through her chest. I would like that very much, Mr. Owens. Zach, he reminded her with a small smile. See you soon, Miss Calhoun. Felicity, she corrected, returning his smile. See you soon, Zach. As she watched him ride away, Felicity wondered if she had made the right choice. The school and town offered security and respectability, but the ranch had felt like something else entirely, like possibility. The first weeks of teaching proved challenging. The children were a mix of ages and backgrounds, some eager to learn, others resentful of being kept from farm work. The town itself was divided by old feuds and new tensions, with Felicity often caught in the middle as the newcomer. Reverend Miller's family was kind but overwhelming. Their constant presence left Felicity with no privacy, and their strict religious views sometimes clashed with her more progressive ideas about education. True to his word, Zach appeared in town every few weeks. His visits became a bright spot in Felicity's increasingly difficult situation. They would share a meal at the small cafe or walk along the creek that ran behind the town, talking about books, dreams, and the changing seasons. During one such visit in late November, as they walked through a grove of bare cottonwood trees, Zach broached a subject that had been growing between them. The possibility hung in the air between them, unspoken but undeniable. Something was growing between them, something neither was quite ready to name. As winter deepened, Felicity's situation in town grew more difficult. The Millers' youngest child fell ill with fever, and the entire household was quarantined. Though Felicity remained healthy, school was suspended, and she found herself confined to her tiny room, with only books for company. It was during this forced isolation that Felicity realized how much she had come to depend on Zach's visits. More than that, she had begun to care for him in a way that went beyond friendship. His steady presence, his quiet strength, and the way his eyes softened when he looked at her had all worked their way into her heart. When word reached the ranch about the illness in town, Zach rode immediately to Willow Creek, despite the heavy snow. Unable to enter the quarantined house, he stood in the yard while Felicity spoke to him from her window. You shouldn't have come in this weather, she called down, though her heart leaped at the sight of him. Couldn't stay away, he replied simply. By the time it was lifted, the young Miller boy was recovering, and the first signs of spring were appearing in the valley. School resumed, but Felicity found herself counting the days until Zach's next visit. When he finally appeared, riding into town on a crisp March morning, Felicity felt her heart quicken. He seemed different, somehow more determined, his usual reserve replaced by a nervous energy. They walked to their usual spot by the creek, where new green shoots were beginning to emerge along the banks. For several minutes, they spoke of ordinary things: the children's progress, the ranch's new calves, the changing weather. Then Zach stopped walking and turned to face her. Felicity, he began, then faltered, removing his hat and running a hand through his hair. "I'm not good with fancy words." "You don't need fancy words with me," she encouraged. "These past months, seeing you whenever I could. It's been the brightest part of my life." His blue eyes held her steadily. "I never expected to find someone like you out here. Someone who makes me think about more than just surviving from season to season." Felicity's breath caught in her throat as he continued. "I know you have your teaching, your independence. I respect that. But I need you to know that I've fallen in love with you, completely and without reservation." The words hung in the air between them, honest and unadorned. Felicity felt tears spring to her eyes. "Zach," she whispered, "I've fallen in love with you too." Relief and joy transformed his face. Felicity completed her teaching contract with renewed energy, counting the days until summer when she would leave Willow Creek for good. Zach visited more frequently, sometimes bringing Henry or Miguel along to help with improvements to the ranch house in preparation for his bride. Their wedding in early June was a simple affair at Willow Creek's church, attended by the townspeople who had come to respect Felicity and the neighboring ranchers who knew Zach. Afterward, they rode to the ranch together, Felicity now on her own horse, a wedding gift from her husband. As they crested the final hill and the ranch came into view, Zach reined in his horse, reaching over to take her hand. "Welcome home, Mrs. Owens." The words filled Felicity with a happiness she had never imagined possible when she'd first set out from Boston. Life as a rancher's wife proved both more challenging and more rewarding than Felicity had anticipated. The work was constant and sometimes grueling, cooking for hungry men, maintaining the house, helping with calving in the spring, and preserving food for winter. But there was joy in it too, especially in the evenings when she and Zach would sit on their porch, watching the sunset and sharing the day's events. True to her calling, Felicity began teaching at the ranch that fall. Miguel was her first student, determined to learn to read and write in English. Soon, children from neighboring homesteads joined the lessons, which Felicity held in the main room of their home 3 days a week. Their first year of marriage brought challenges as well as triumphs. A harsh winter storm nearly decimated the herd. Zach worked himself to exhaustion, saving as many cattle as he could, and Felicity feared losing him to pneumonia when he finally collapsed after days without proper rest. She nursed him back to health with a fierceness that surprised even her, refusing to let this happiness she had found slip away. Spring brought renewal and unexpected news. Felicity was with child. The prospect of becoming parents filled them both with wonder and trepidation. The nearest doctor was in Willow Creek, and childbirth on the frontier was fraught with danger. As Sarah grew, so did the ranch. Zach's careful management and hard work began to show results. They added a proper classroom to the house, and Felicity's school gained a reputation that brought students from as far as 20 miles away. When Sarah was 3, Felicity discovered she was expecting again. This pregnancy proved harder than the first, with weeks of sickness that left her drained. Zach took over many of her duties, even attempting to continue lessons for the children, though his efforts at teaching reading were met with more amusement than progress. Their son, James Henry Owens, arrived in the summer of 1881, a sturdy boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined chin. Life settled into a rhythm marked by the seasons, the children's milestones, and the fortunes of the ranch. There were difficult years: drought that threatened the cattle, a fire that destroyed part of the barn, illness that swept through the area taking neighbors and friends. But there were wonderful years too, with abundant harvests, healthy calves, and the joy of watching their children grow strong and curious. By 1886, the O Ranch, as they now called it, had become one of the most prosperous in the region. Zach had expanded their herd, added sheep on Felicity's suggestion, and built a new, larger house with proper bedrooms for the children and a dedicated schoolroom. On the 10th anniversary of the night they first met, Zach surprised Felicity by recreating their first encounter. He built a fire outside, letting it burn down to embers as the sun set. When Felicity came looking for him, concerned by his absence from dinner, she found him sitting beside the dying fire. "Want me to build it up again?" she asked with a smile, remembering his words from so long ago. He looked up, love evident in his eyes. "I was hoping you'd say that." Felicity sat beside him on the log he'd placed there. 10 years, she marveled. Sometimes it seems impossible that so much time has passed. Best 10 years of my life, Zach said, taking her hand in his. Though I hope to have at least 40 more with you. Only 40, she teased. I was counting on 50 at minimum. They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the fire died down further, neither moving to rebuild it yet. The ranch was quiet, the children asleep in the house, the hands retired to the bunkhouse. Do you ever regret it? Zach asked suddenly. Coming west? Marrying a rough cowboy instead of some cultured Easterner? Felicity turned to look at him, surprised by the question. Never. Not for a single moment. Even during that terrible blizzard our second year? Or when James was sick and we couldn't get the doctor? Even then, she assured him, squeezing his hand. Those were the hard times, yes. But they were our hard times, faced together. That makes all the difference. Zach nodded, seemingly satisfied with her answer. From his pocket, he produced a small wooden box. I've been saving for this, he said, opening it to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a small diamond. To replace that simple band I gave you when we married. You deserve better than plain steel. Tears filled Felicity's eyes as he slipped the ring onto her finger, next to her wedding band. It's beautiful, Zach, but I never needed anything fancy. I know, he smiled. That's why you deserve it all the more. As the last embers of their anniversary fire faded, Zach pulled her close. So, Mrs. Owens, want me to build it up again? Felicity leaned her head against his shoulder, contentment washing over her. No, she whispered. Let's go home. Our fire there burns plenty strong. Hand in hand, they walked back to the house they had built together, not just the physical structure, but the life within it, filled with love, learning, and the family they had created. The years continued to pass, bringing new joys and sorrows. Sarah grew into a bright young woman with her mother's love of learning and her father's quiet strength. At 18, she left for college in Denver, the first in their area, to pursue higher education. James, more drawn to ranch life, worked alongside his father, gradually taking on more responsibility as Zach's hair turned gray and his steps slowed. Two more children had joined their family, Rebecca in 1883 and Michael in 1886, both now teenagers, helping with the ranch and Felicity's school, which had grown to include 15 students of various ages. By 1896, as Felicity and Zach entered their 50s, the West was changing. The railroad had reached nearby towns, bringing more settlers and ending the isolation they had once known. The wild frontier was slowly being tamed, for better and worse. On warm summer evenings, they still sat on their porch, watching the sun set over land that had once seemed so hostile but had become their beloved home. Sometimes they reminisced about that first meeting by a dying fire, marveling at the twist of fate that had brought them together. I was so afraid that night, Felicity admitted one evening. All the children I've taught, the families who've settled nearby because of the school. I think about how empty my life would have been without you, Zach replied. How this land would just be land, not a home. As darkness fell completely, Zach stood and offered his hand to help Felicity up. Though neither was old by modern standards, years of frontier life had taken their toll on bones and muscles. Let's go inside, he suggested. I'll build up the fire. You always do, she smiled, leaning into his embrace. That's the first thing I loved about you, you know. Your willingness to rebuild what was dying. Later, as they lay in bed listening to the familiar sounds of their home, the creaking of the wood as it cooled, the distant lowing of cattle, the soft breathing of their younger children in nearby rooms, Felicity reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a desperate young woman beside a dying fire to the matriarch of a thriving ranch and school, her life had unfolded in ways she could never have imagined that night in 1876. The cowboy who had offered to rebuild her fire had instead helped her build an entire life, one filled with love, purpose, and deep contentment. What are you thinking about? Zach murmured, already half asleep. About how sometimes the end of one thing is just the beginning of something better, she replied, curling closer to his warmth. About how grateful I am that my fire was dying when you found me. He agreed drowsily. Best thing that ever happened to me, finding you by that fire. As sleep claimed them both, the fire in their hearth continued to burn steadily, Much like the love that had sustained them through 20 years together, a love kindled beside a dying campfire in the wilderness, tended carefully through seasons of plenty and want, and now burning with the steady, enduring warmth of abiding devotion. In the years that followed, the O Ranch continued to thrive under the joint care of Zach, Felicity, and their growing family. Sarah returned from college as a qualified teacher, taking over some of Felicity's duties at the school. James married a neighboring rancher's daughter, building a small house on the property to raise his own family. Rebecca showed a surprising talent for business, handling the ranch's accounts and expanding their operations to include a small dairy. Michael, the youngest, combined his father's ranching skills with new agricultural techniques learned from books and occasional courses in Denver. Willow Creek grew from a dusty outpost to a proper town, with Felicity serving on the school board and Zach reluctantly accepting a position as county commissioner. Their reputation for fairness and hard work earned them the respect of newcomers and old-timers alike. In 1906, as they celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children, grandchildren, former students, and friends, Zachary and Felicity Owens were acknowledged as pioneers who had helped shape the territory into what it had become. "Not bad," Zach whispered to his wife during the celebration, "for a cowboy and a schoolteacher who met by a dying fire." Felicity squeezed his hand, her heart full. "The best kind of fire," she replied, "is the one that looks like it's going out but just needs the right person to build it up again." And in the warm glow of the life they had built together, they both knew that some fires, once properly tended, never truly die.